You shared a really interesting analysis of this evolving Azeroth, creating a living world panel from PAX East 2025.
Yeah, it gives a great look inside how the World of Warcraft team thinks, doesn't it?
It really does. It seems like it gives us a fantastic look inside how they think about keeping that world feeling, well, alive.
And what's fascinating here is getting past just, the bullet points of new features. It's about understanding the philosophy behind it all.
Right.
I mean, for a game that's been running for nearly 20 years now, making the world feel dynamic, responsive, that's not simple. It takes real intentional design on a lot of different levels.
Exactly. So our mission today is to dive deep into this source material you've shared, pull out the really key insights from this panel discussion, and figure out how Blizzard actually approaches this challenge.
How they think about making World of Warcraft feel like a living place.
Yeah.
One that changes over time.
And what that means for you, the player, looking ahead. So first off, the panel itself. It featured a few key people from the dev team. The notes you provided highlighted who was actually on stage, who were they, and why do their roles kind of give us context.
Okay, right. So kicking off the intros, they had Paul Cubitt. The source notes he's a 20-year veteran, calls him a quest wizard.
20 years, wow.
Yeah, deep history there. And apparently he's known more recently in the community as the Tuskar Soup, yes chef guy, from some fun in-game thing.
Huh.
So that tells you, he's got that historical perspective, but also connects with the current player experience, the narrative side of things.
Makes sense. And then Jeremy Fiesel, 15 years at Blizzard.
Yep, Jeremy Fiesel. He's described as the live services boss, really focused on the ongoing game. The source credits him as the father of things like Alice Razor, that famous raid boss.
Oh yeah, I remember Alice Razor.
And features like Battle Pets, the pet collecting system. He's the guy focused on that patch between the patches stuff that keeps the world feeling active day to day.
Gotcha. Live content lead. Who else?
Then there was Maria Hamilton. 5 years in, an associate design director. The analysis points to her work on stuff like Dead Blanchy, that popular rare mount.
Oh, Blanchy, yes.
And notes her role as the narrative glue for the upcoming World Soul saga. So she brings that perspective on how the ongoing stories shape the world itself.
Okay, narrative focus. And Jesse Kurlancheek. Only 3 years, but a big title.
Right, principal designer for player housing. Which is huge, obviously. The source just notes he's very dad, which is a fun little detail.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, his presence clearly signals how important player housing is going forward.
Definitely. And who was hosting?
Randy Jordan, a community manager. The analysis described his job as herding dev cats, basically handling fan interaction, Q&A, trivia, that sort of thing.
So a good mix then. Veterans, live content, narrative, a major new system lead, and someone bridging to the community.
Exactly. Provides a pretty well-rounded view.
So with the intros done, the conversation apparently turned pretty quickly to their core philosophy. Like, how do they actually think about making Azeroth feel alive? The panel structured it around 4 core ideas, or pillars. What was the first one? The one about the immediate experience.
They started with minute-to-minute dynamism. So this is about things happening like right now as you're playing.
Okay.
It's the unexpected stuff, finding a rare mob you didn't know was up, stumbling on a hidden treasure chest, or even just seeing the world change subtly with the day-night cycle.
Little surprises.
Yeah, the source highlights this is really designed to make your immediate surroundings feel a bit unpredictable and rewarding to explore.
Okay, so that's the immediate stuff. How does that mesh with the bigger changes, the ones that happen over longer periods?
Well, that leads straight into the second pillar, seasonal and patch change. This covers the more planned, larger shifts in the world.
Like holidays.
Exactly. Think about in-game holidays, like Wintervale or Hallow's End, changing the look of cities, adding temporary quests and activities.
Right, the decorations go up, special vendors appear.
And it also covers the big stuff, like significant story unlocks, new zones opening up, major content updates that arrive with a big patch. It's that feeling that the world is evolving in these noticeable, scheduled waves.
Makes sense. The world feels different when a new raid opens or a new chapter of the story unfolds. Now, the third pillar mentioned in the analysis sounded really interesting. Emergent player chaos. What's that about?
Yeah, this one's fascinating. This is the magic that happens when players interact with the world, and maybe more importantly with each other, on a massive scale, but in ways the developers didn't explicitly plan.
So not a structured battleground, but something else.
Exactly. It's not something they design directly, but something the game systems allow for, and something they often have to react to. The analysis gives that classic example. The original legendary player versus player battles between Terran Mill and South Shore back in vanilla.
Oh, the Hillsbrad Slugfests.
Yeah, that wasn't a designed event, right? It was just huge groups of players deciding, hey, let's fight here. And that organic chaos became this iconic part of World of Warcraft's history. It made the world feel dangerous and unpredictable in a player-driven way.
That's a great point. The players themselves are this huge, unpredictable force making the world feel alive. Okay, and the fourth pillar.
That's tech plus player habits. This is the idea that the game's underlying technology is always evolving, obviously. But just as critically, the developers are constantly watching how players are actually playing.
How they use the game.
Yeah, how they interact, what tools outside the game they're using. The analysis used the example of voice chat, how players shifted over the years from Ventrilo or TeamSpeak to platforms like Discord.
Okay.
That change in player behavior and the external tech they use influences how the game needs to work, maybe what social features need to be added or improved in the game. They iterate based on what players are actually doing.
So, these 4 pillars, the immediate moments, the scheduled changes, the unplanned player stuff, and that feedback loop between tech and how people play, that's the foundation. That's how they think about keeping World of Warcraft dynamic.
Pretty much. It shows. It's not just about adding new zones. It's this multi-layered approach to creating a sense of ongoing life,
Yeah.
on different timescales.
Right. Okay, so looking back at how they actually got to this point, the panel also apparently highlighted some key moments in the game's history, specific tech jumps or design leaps that shaped how World of Warcraft evolved. Let's walk through some of those points from the source analysis.
Yeah, starting way, way back in vanilla, the original release, the challenges were really fundamental back then. Even things we take for granted now, like rare creature spawns, could sometimes cause major server strain if too many players showed up at once.
Right.
And the source mentions the infamous Ankiraj Gong event, this massive server-wide moment, which sometimes literally melted servers under the sheer load of players trying to participate.
Huh. The era of melting servers. Good times, or maybe not so good times for the engineers. What about Burning Crusade?
VC brought some big additions. Most notably, it introduced daily quests. These repeatable tasks you could do once a day for rewards.
Yeah.
That became a real staple for endgame content for years.
Still is, in many ways.
True. But the source also revisits that legendary accidental bug. The one where the quality assurance team somehow, unintentionally, spawned 100,000 invisible bunnies in Blade's Edge Mountains.
The invisible bunnies. I remember hearing about that.
Yeah, a classic story of just unexpected development weirdness. That incident, according to the source, actually crashed the server because of the sheer number of invisible things the game had to track.
Wow. A truly impactful bug, then.
You could say that. Moving on, Wrath of the Lich King saw the implementation of phasing technology. This was pretty revolutionary at the time.
Right, where the world could literally change around you based on your quest progress.
Exactly. You'd see a different version of the same area than someone else.
Ah.
But, the source notes, this initially caused big problems, where friends who were on different quest steps couldn't even see each other, even standing in the same spot.
Oh yeah, that was frustrating.
Huge social friction. It needed a later update, the party sync feature, to help fix that, letting friends sync up their phases.
A good example of tech having unintended social side effects that needed fixing. Then, Cataclysm.
Cataclysm brought those massive zone overhauls, permanently reshaping huge parts of the original continents. The source analysis points out this was a dramatic change for many players' familiar stomping grounds.
A really bold move.
It was. And the strong feeling of nostalgia for the old world that resulted from that change actually played a significant role years later in the decision to create World of Warcraft Classic.
Huh, so that's a direct feedback loop player reaction shaping a major future product decision much later on.
Interesting. What about Mists of Pandaria? Mists, built on the daily quest system, introducing rotating sets of dailies, and importantly, features like the Tiller's Farm, that personal plot where you could grow crops.
Farm, yeah.
The source analysis specifically calls this a proto-housing feature, kind of a very early, simple precursor to the much bigger personal space systems they're planning now.
You can definitely see the seeds being planted there. Okay, Legion.
Legion shifted the focus again more towards dynamic open world content with world quests, those objectives that just pop up on your map, and emissaries, which rewarded doing quests in specific zones.
Right, that kept the zones relevant longer.
Exactly. And Legion also had a major focus on hidden secrets embedded in the world. Really complex ones. The source highlights the Jennifer Cat pet secret. Apparently, it took the player community 11 months to collectively figure that one out.
11 months for one secret pet? Wow.
Staggering, isn't it? And that level of player dedication, that deep dive into the game's mysteries, that links right back to that tech plus player habits pillar, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, the devs put these intricate secrets in. And the players, using external tools like Discord to coordinate massive search efforts, make a habit, a whole community, around solving them together.
Ah, right.
In fact, the source notes that an earlier secret, finding a Murloc egg hidden in Northrend back in Wrath, was actually a key moment that sparked the formation of the modern, really organized secret-finding community we see on Discord today.
Huh. So one specific secret helped kickstart a whole player subculture. That's fascinating.
Absolutely. It shows how developer intent and player behavior really feed into each other. And then finally, Dragonflight, the most recent expansion, brought big innovations like skywriting, that dynamic physics-based dragon riding.
Which feels great, by the way.
Totally changed how you move around the world. And multi-step open-world scenarios, larger, evolving public events. The source even mentions they added a ride-along feature for skywriting, specifically for players prone to motion sickness.
Oh, that's thoughtful.
Yeah, it shows that iteration based on player experience accessibility, it's still a priority, even with big new systems.
So this whole timeline really underscores the analysis's point, doesn't it? Every expansion builds on past experiments, learns from successes and failures, even the invisible bunny kind, and keeps trying new things, constantly pushing what the game can do.
Precisely. It's a long road of iteration.
Speaking of lesson learned and trying new things, let's talk about what's coming next, based on this panel. The source analysis highlighted some specific announcements and future plans that definitely have players buzzing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, building on that idea of revisiting past content in new ways, World of Warcraft Remix was clearly a hit with the Mists of Pandaria version.
Seems like it, yeah.
So the panel confirmed it. Legion Remix is officially greenlit. It's happening.
Awesome. And here's where it gets really interesting. The source mentioned 2 specific teasers they dropped for Legion Remix.
Right. They talked about Mythic Plus Keystones.
Yeah.
You know, the items for challenging scaling dungeons, having, and this is a quote, bananas stat scaling.
Banana stat scaling.
Okay. Sounds absolutely wild, right? Pushing character power way beyond normal limits, just for that mode. And they also teased a hard mode Shattered Timeline outdoor tier.
Shattered Timeline.
Yeah, suggesting they're creating significantly tougher open world content within that remix framework, maybe for players who want a serious challenge outside of dungeons and raids.
So it sounds like they're taking the remix idea and really pushing the envelope on difficulty and maybe even temporary power progression. Okay, what else beyond remixing old stuff?
Well, they talked about creating entirely new ways to play World of Warcraft. Clearly, the success of Plunderstorm, that pirate-themed battle royale mode they dropped earlier this year, showed there's an appetite for experiences outside the main questing dungeon raid loop.
It definitely caused a stir.
So the panel announced they were working on a new game mode.
Okay. Details.
Very few. Which is interesting in itself. The Force analysis specifically notes the vibe is described as a scary story.
Ooh, spooky.
And they explicitly stated, it is not a battle royale mode. That's pretty much all they gave.
Huh. That deliberate vagueness is fascinating. It leaves so much room for players to speculate. What could a horror or spooky-themed mode even look like in World of Warcraft?
Right. It invites a ton of imagination. Which parts of the lore would they draw on? Drustvar? Shadowlands? Something else entirely.
Yeah, lots of possibilities there. Then, of course, the really big one, the announcement many players have been waiting literally years for.
Player housing.
Yes. Finally confirmed. This is a massive feature. The source analysis confirms it's launching in the Midnight expansion. That's the second chapter of the World Soul saga.
And they describe the structure a bit. It'll be personal plots of land, but located within shared neighborhoods. So you have your own space, but it's part of a community area.
Interesting. And how do you decorate?
Decor will primarily be earned through quests, apparently. Which is an interesting choice, tying that customization into gameplay progression, not just, say, a cash shop.
Good to hear.
And the developers clearly see this as a foundational system, not just a small side feature. They said they have years of roadmap ahead for player housing.
Years. Okay, so they plan to really build on this over time.
Seems like it. It's not just a one-and-done addition. It's a system they plan to expand significantly.
And the source analysis had that great little detail that shows how fundamental this is becoming.
Ah, the innkeepers. Yeah.
Innkeepers in the game have already had their dialogue updated to include the option Bind My Hearthstone.
It's a small text change, but it acknowledges that players will now have actual homes, not just inns, to bind their Hearthstone to, their main teleport spell.
It really shows they're weaving the feature into the fabric of the existing game world. It's not just tacked on.
It's those subtle details that really help sell the fantasy, you know. And finally, they touched on their development pace, their cadence.
Right, the patch delivery schedule.
Yeah. The source notes that the efficient, pretty much on-time patch delivery rhythm we saw throughout Dragonflight, that's the plan going forward. That's the template for the entire upcoming World Soul saga.
The whole saga. So the War Within, Midnight, and the Last Titan.
All three expansions. They're aiming for that consistent, predictable content flow.
That's definitely something players appreciate, knowing roughly when to expect the next update. Confirming that tempo for the whole saga is a pretty key takeaway about their planning.
For sure. Reliability is important.
Okay, before we wrap up this deep dive into the panel, the source analysis also sprinkled in a few fun, memorable little details and trivia points that came up during the chat. Always good to have those.
They do add a bit of color, like the insight into Blizzard's own service awards. Apparently, 15-year veterans get a sapphire ring.
Nice.
5-year employees get a mini sword, and way back, earlier employees just got mugs.
Yeah, a mini sword sounds cooler than a mug, I guess.
A little peek behind the curtain at their company traditions. And of course, revisiting the 100,000 Invisible Bunnies story.
Can't forget the bunnies.
The source specifically attributes that unforgettable bug to the QA team, accidentally spawning them in Blade's Edge during Burning Crusade testing, and yeah, confirming it actually crashed the server.
Yeah.
A moment of pure testing chaos.
Speaks to the complexity of these massive online games, right? Anything can happen.
It really does. And as we mentioned earlier, the source also highlighted that the discovery of the very first hidden secret pet that Murloc Egg tucked away in Northrend back in Wrath.
Yeah.
That specific discovery was the direct catalyst that led to the formation of the modern, highly organized secret-finding community that thrives on Discord and other platforms today.
Wow. So one little hidden egg directly shaped a significant part of the player community culture as we know it.
It's a powerful example of how a small design choice can inspire a whole movement within the player base. And finally, that fun panel moment with Paul Cubitt, the Tuskar soup guy.
The yes chef moment.
Yeah. Prompting the audience to yell, yes, chef, back at him. Just a little moment of connection, showing the rapport between the developers and the community they're building for.
Nice little human touches. Okay, so drawing all this together then, we've got the developers' framework, those 4 pillars for thinking about a living world. We've got the historical timeline showing how they've built, experimented, learned over, gosh, nearly 20 years now.
Right.
And we've got these exciting future plans, Legion Remix, the mysterious, scary new game mode, the huge arrival of player housing. What does this all mean for you, the listener, when you put it all together?
Well, I think it really shows that the evolution of World of Warcraft isn't just random. You know, it's not accidental. It's the result of pretty intentional design choices.
Okay.
It comes from that constant feedback loop between what the technology allows and understanding how players actually behave, how they interact with the world and each other.
The tech plus player habits pillar again.
Exactly. It comes from a willingness to experiment with completely new ways to play, like Plunderstorm or this upcoming scary mode, things outside the main adventure. And it comes from strategic long-term planning, like laying out the entire World Soul saga and its patch cadence.
So it means the changes you see in the game, whether it's fundamental shifts like skywriting or highly anticipated features like player housing, they're rooted in lessons learned from all those past experiments.
Pretty much, successes and failures. Invisible bunnies and melted servers included. It highlights how player interactions, even unexpected chaos like Terran Mel, or the formation of communities like the Secret Finders, have directly shaped what the developers prioritize.
And the kinds of diverse experiences Blizzard is focusing on delivering next.
Right. Everything from creating those deeply personal spaces with housing to exploring potentially spooky themes in entirely new game modes. It's all part of that ongoing evolution.
It's been a really fascinating deep dive into how Blizzard thinks about keeping Azeroth feeling like a place that genuinely lives and breathes, and what that philosophy is actually bringing to the game's future. We covered the panel's 4 pillars, the key historical leaps that got them here, and those exciting upcoming features Legion Remix, that intriguing scary story mode, and player housing finally arriving in Midnight.
Yeah, lots to look forward to, and definitely some solid insight into their design process and thinking.
So here's maybe a final thought for you to mull over, based on everything we've discussed. Given the panel really emphasized that tech plus player habits pillar as a core driver of development, what other current player behaviors or community trends in World of Warcraft do you think might influence the next big tech leap or design shift the developers consider down the line?
Good question.
Or maybe if you were designing that scary story game mode they teased, what kind of terrifying experience would you personally want to create, drawing from all the dark corners of the World of Warcraft universe?
Definitely something to ponder as Azeroth keeps evolving
This has been The Deep Dive.
into the ever-evolving world of Azeroth.
Until next time.